The blood ran slow down his left arm, dripping from his fingertips onto the worn wooden planks of the porch. Silas Hawthorne stood in the doorway of his cabin rifle, raised eyes scanning the darkness beyond the tree line, where shadows moved like wolves circling wounded prey. Behind him, inside the cabin, Eleanor pressed her back against the wall beside the window. Her face was pale in the firelight, bruised and swollen from the beating she had endured, but her eyes held no fear. Not anymore. Something had changed in her during these 10 days. Something had hardened into steel. She gripped the pistol he had given her with steady hands. "They will come back," she said. Her voice was quiet but certain. More of them this time. Silas did not turn around. He could hear the distant sound of hoofbeats retreating into the night, carrying Marcus Webb and what remained of his men back toward town. But he knew this was not over. Men like Webb did not accept defeat. They returned with more guns, more money, more lawyers, more power. "I know," he said. He worked the lever of his rifle, chambering another round. The metallic sound echoed in the silence that followed the gunfire. "And when they come, I will be waiting." Eleanor moved to stand beside him. In the moonlight, her red hair caught silver highlights, and despite everything, despite the blood and the violence and the fear, Silas thought she had never looked more beautiful, more alive. "We will be waiting," she corrected him. He looked at her then. This woman who had stumbled into his life 10 days ago, unconscious and broken on a mountain road. This woman who had awakened something in him that he thought had died 15 years ago in a burning house in Pennsylvania. "Yes," he said, "we." This is how it all began. Not with gunfire and blood, not with the confrontation that would shake these mountains. It began with a photograph. A woman with hair like autumn fire, and a man who had been waiting for her his entire life without knowing it. 10 days earlier. The morning sun had barely crested the eastern peaks when Silas Hawthorne rode down from his cabin toward the town of Silver Creek. He made this journey once a month, no more, no less. He would trade his furs and hides for supplies, speak to as few people as possible, and return to the solitude that had become his sanctuary. 52 years he had lived on this earth. 15 of those years he had spent alone in these mountains, and he had convinced himself that this was enough, that a man could survive on silence and solitude, that he did not need the world of men with its cruelty and disappointment and loss. His horse, a black stallion named Shadow, picked his way carefully down the rocky trail. Ahead of them, Hunter, a brown hound who had been his only companion for 6 years, trotted with his nose to the ground, following scents that only he could detect. The autumn air was crisp and clean. The aspens had begun to turn gold, and the higher peaks already wore caps of early snow. It was beautiful country, harsh but honest. It demanded everything from a man and gave nothing back but the satisfaction of survival. Silas was thinking about nothing in particular when Hunter stopped. The dog stood rigid in the middle of the trail, ears pricked forward, a low growl building in his throat. Then he began to bark. Not the excited bark of a discovered rabbit or squirrel. This was different, urgent, almost frantic. Silas reined Shadow to a halt and reached for the pistol at his hip. 15 years in these mountains had taught him caution. Bears, mountain lions, and occasionally men who had fled civilization for reasons best left unexamined all called these peaks home. "What is it, boy?" Hunter barked again and bounded toward a cluster of bushes beside the trail. Silas dismounted, drew his pistol, and approached slowly. What he found made him stop breathing. A young woman lay curled beneath a fallen log, unconscious or dead. He could not tell. Her dress, which might once have been blue, was torn and filthy, stained with mud and what looked like dried blood. Her hair, a deep auburn red, was matted and tangled with leaves and twigs. But it was not her appearance that made Silas's blood run cold. It was the marks on her body. Deep purple grooves circled her wrists where rope had cut into flesh. Similar marks ringed her throat, the clear impression of fingers that had squeezed until she could not breathe. Long scratches ran down her forearms, the kind made by fingernails clawing desperately at restraints. Someone had tied this woman. Someone had tried to strangle her. and somehow, by some miracle or sheer force of will, she had escaped. Silas knelt beside her and pressed 2 fingers to her throat. Her pulse was weak but steady. She was alive. "Miss," he said softly. "Miss, can you hear me?" No response. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold and clammy. She was severely dehydrated, probably had not eaten in days, and was showing signs of shock. He should leave her here. That was what the voice in his head told him. The same voice that had kept him alive through 4 years of civil war and 10 years of hunting the worst men the frontier had to offer. This was not his problem. Getting involved meant complications, questions, and the possibility of violence. But when he looked at her face, pale and vulnerable beneath the grime, he saw another face. A face that had haunted his dreams for 15 years. Sarah. His daughter. 7 years old when he left for the war. 7 years old forever, because she never saw 8. The fire had taken her while he was fighting at Gettysburg. Had taken her and her mother, both leaving him with nothing but a folded flag and a grief that had nearly destroyed him. This woman was not Sarah. She was perhaps 24 or 25, a grown woman, not a child. But there was something in her helplessness, something in the way she lay there broken and alone that reached through the armor he had built around his heart and touched something raw. He could not leave her. Silas holstered his pistol and gently lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, light as a bird, and he wondered how long she had been wandering these mountains. He carried her to Shadow and managed to settle her across the saddle, then mounted behind her, cradling her against his chest. The trip to town would have to wait. As he turned Shadow back toward his cabin, something fell from the woman's torn pocket. A piece of paper folded and stained. Silas retrieved it and unfolded it carefully. It was a photograph. A portrait of the very woman he held in his arms, though in the image she looked healthy and whole. Her hair arranged beautifully, her expression composed and dignified. The kind of photograph a woman might send to a prospective husband. On the back, someone had written in a cramped, angry hand, "Property of M.W., find and return, large reward. Property." Silas felt his jaw tighten. He had known men who thought of women as property, had killed some of them back when killing came easier. The word alone told him everything he needed to know about whoever was hunting this woman. He tucked the photograph into his coat and urged Shadow into a faster pace. She woke screaming. Silas had placed her on the bed in the smaller of his cabin's 2 bedrooms, had covered her with blankets, and built up the fire in the main room to take the chill from the air. He was sitting at his table cleaning his rifle when the scream tore through the silence. He moved to the bedroom door but did not enter. He had seen this before in soldiers waking from nightmares of battle and women rescued from captivity. The worst thing he could do was crowd her, touch her, give her any reason to believe she was still in danger. He stood in the doorway, hands visible at his sides, and spoke in the same calm voice he used with spooked horses. "You are safe." She had backed herself into the corner of the bed, pressing against the headboard, her eyes wild and unfocused. Her breathing came in short, panicked gasps. "Where am I? Who are you? What do you want?" "My name is Silas Hawthorne. You are in my cabin in the mountains above Silver Creek. I found you on the trail this morning." He did not move. "No one is going to hurt you here." She stared at him, and he could see her mind working, trying to assess the situation, trying to determine if he was telling the truth or if this was simply another form of captivity. "There is water on the table beside you," he said, "and food when you are ready. I will be in the other room. The door has a bolt on the inside. You can lock it if that makes you feel safer." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone with her fear. For the rest of that first day she did not emerge. Silas heard her moving, occasionally, heard the bolt slide into place, heard what might have been crying late in the night. He slept on the chair by the fire, his rifle within reach, and tried not to think about the photograph in his pocket. Property of M.W. Who was M.W.? What had he done to her? And how far would he go to get her back? The next morning Silas woke before dawn and prepared breakfast. Eggs from his small flock of chickens, bacon from the smokehouse coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. He set a plate outside her door, knocked twice, and retreated. An hour later, the door opened. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in one of his blankets like armor. The swelling around her eyes had begun to subside, but the bruises remained ugly purple shadows against her pale skin. She was thin, too, thin, her collarbones sharp beneath the borrowed shirt she wore. But her eyes were clear now, watchful, intelligent. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was hoarse, damaged perhaps from screaming or from the fingers that had wrapped around her throat. "For the food. You need to eat more. You have been without food for several days, I think." She nodded slowly, still watching him with that careful assessment. "Who are you?" "I told you, Silas Hawthorne." "That is a name. It is not an answer." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Why did you help me? You do not know me. You do not know what I have done." Silas set down his coffee cup and met her gaze directly. "I know what was done to you. I saw the marks, the rope burns on your wrists, the bruises on your throat." His voice hardened. "I do not need to know anything else to know that whoever did that to you deserves to hang." Something flickered in her eyes. Not quite trust, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of belief. "My name is Eleanor," she said. "Eleanor Whitmore." "Eleanor." He said the name slowly, feeling the weight of it. "Will you tell me what happened to you?" She was silent for a long moment. Then she moved to the table and sat down across from him, keeping the full width of the wooden surface between them. "I came to Colorado to be married," she said. "A mail-order bride. The man who sent for me was named Thomas Garrett, a rancher. He was supposed to meet me when the stage arrived in Silver Creek." Silas knew the name. Garrett had been a decent man, one of the larger landowners in the valley. Had been. "Garrett is dead," he said. "Bear attack about 3 weeks ago." Eleanor nodded, unsurprised. "They told me when I arrived. I had traveled for 3 weeks to marry a man I had never met, and he was already in the ground." She laughed bitterly. "I had no money to return home, no family to send for me. I had nothing. So how did you end up on my mountain with rope burns on your wrists?" Her hands tightened on the blanket. "There is a man, from Philadelphia. His name is Marcus Webb." She spoke the name like a curse. "My father owed him money, a great deal of money. When my father died 6 months ago, Webb came to collect." "Collect how?" "He offered to forgive the debt if I would become his wife." Her voice was flat now, drained of emotion. "He is 58 years old. He has buried 2 wives already. And the way he looked at me?" She shuddered. "I would rather have died than let him touch me." "So you ran." "I stole $200 from his safe and bought a ticket west. I thought if I could reach Colorado, if I could marry Thomas Garrett, Webb would have no legal claim on me." She closed her eyes. "But Garrett was dead, and Webb followed me." Silas absorbed this information in silence. A debt collector from Philadelphia, wealthy enough to travel across the country to retrieve one woman. A man who considered her his property. This was worse than he had thought. "He found you in Silver Creek." "His men found me, 4 of them. They grabbed me behind the boarding house and dragged me into the woods. They said Webb wanted me alive, but that he had not said anything about undamaged." Her voice broke slightly. "They tied me up. They were going to. "You do not have to say it." "But I got away. One of them got drunk and fell asleep. I worked at the ropes until my wrists bled, and then I ran. I do not know how far I ran or for how long. I remember falling. I remember cold. And then I remember waking up here." Silas sat in silence, processing her story. A woman fleeing a monster. A woman who had risked everything for freedom. A woman who had nearly died rather than submit. He thought of the photograph in his pocket. Property of M.W. "Webb will not stop looking for you," he said. It was not a question. "No, he will not." Eleanor met his eyes. "You should let me go. I have already brought danger to your door. If they find me here—" "Then they find me too." Silas stood and retrieved his rifle from beside the door. "I have faced worse than hired thugs from Philadelphia, Miss Whitmore. Webb's men do not frighten me. You do not know Marcus Webb. He has money. He has power. He has connections with judges and politicians. And I have this cabin, these mountains, and 52 years of experience killing men who needed killing." He set the rifle on the table between them. "You can stay here until you are healed, and we figure out what to do next. Webb's men will not find this place easily, and if they do, they will wish they had not." Eleanor stared at him. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Silas thought of Sarah, thought of the burning house he had not been there to save her from, thought of 15 years of guilt and solitude and the slow deadening of everything that had once made him human. "Because I have spent too many years standing aside while evil men did evil things," he said. "Because I am tired of living with the ghosts of people I could not save." He met her gaze. "And because when I found you on that trail, something in me woke up that I thought was dead forever." It was more than he had said to anyone in 15 years, more than he had admitted even to himself. Eleanor looked at him for a long time. Then slowly she nodded. "All right," she said. "I will stay, for now." The days that followed took on a strange rhythm. Eleanor was a different person in daylight than she was at night. During the day she was curious and capable, following Silas around the cabin as he did his chores, asking questions about life in the mountains. She learned quickly this city woman from Philadelphia, and she was not afraid of hard work. But at night the nightmares came. Silas would hear her crying through the thin walls, would hear her muffled screams as she relived whatever horrors Webb's men had inflicted on her. He never entered her room, never pushed, but each morning he was there with coffee and breakfast, a solid presence that asked nothing and offered everything. On the third day, he taught her to shoot. "Why?" she asked when he handed her the pistol. "Because a woman who can defend herself is a woman who does not have to depend on others for protection." He positioned her facing a row of tin cans on a fallen log. "Hold it like this, firm but not tight. Let your arm absorb the kick." She was a natural. Her first shot missed by inches. Her second clipped the edge of the can. Her third sent it flying. "My father taught me," she said when Silas expressed surprise. Before everything went wrong." "He sounds like he was a good man once." "He was." Her expression darkened. "The gambling destroyed him, and the drinking that came after. But yes, once he was the best father a girl could ask for." They practiced for an hour until Eleanor could hit the cans consistently from 20 feet. Then they sat on the cabin porch and watched the sun set over the mountains. "It is beautiful here," she said. "Peaceful." "It is." "Do you never get lonely?" Silas considered the question. "I thought I did not. I thought I had everything I needed here. My cabin, my books, my animals." He looked at her. "But these past 3 days having someone to talk to, someone to share meals with, I am beginning to wonder if I was just lying to myself." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Why did you come here, Silas? What were you running from?" It was the question he had been dreading, the question he knew he would have to answer eventually. "I was a soldier," he said. "In the war. I saw things no man should see. Did things no man should do." He stared at the distant peaks. "When it was over, I went home. But home was gone. My wife and daughter died in a fire while I was fighting at Gettysburg. I had nothing left. I am sorry. So I went west, became a bounty hunter, told myself I was bringing justice to lawless men. But the truth is, I just wanted to keep killing. It was the only thing I knew how to do." He paused. "Then one night we tracked a bank robber to a farmhouse. We thought he was hiding inside. We went in shooting." Eleanor watched him with quiet intensity. There was no bank robber, just a family, a man, his wife, their 2 children. In the darkness, in the confusion, I shot the father, killed him instantly. Silas's voice was flat dead. He was innocent, just a farmer who happened to live in the wrong place at the wrong time. and I killed him. It was an accident. It was still murder. I still see his face every night when I close my eyes." He turned to look at her. "That is why I came here, Eleanor. That is what I am running from. Not the world, myself." She reached out and placed her hand over his. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched him. Her fingers were small and warm against his weathered skin. "You are not a monster, Silas Hawthorne. Monsters do not feel guilt. Monsters do not spend 15 years punishing themselves for one mistake." She squeezed his hand. "You are a good man who did a terrible thing. There is a difference." He looked at her hand on his, at her face still bruised but healing, at her eyes which held no judgment, only understanding. "You barely know me," he said. "I know enough." She withdrew her hand and stood. "I am going to bed. Good night, Silas." "Good night, Eleanor." He sat on the porch for a long time after she left, listening to the wind in the pines and feeling for the first time in 15 years like he might not be entirely alone in the world. On the 4th morning, Old Bear came. Silas heard the approaching horse long before he saw it and had his rifle ready when the old man emerged from the tree line. But he relaxed as soon as he recognized the rider. Old Bear was the closest thing he had to a friend in these mountains, another hermit who had fled the world of men for reasons he never discussed. "Trouble coming," Old Bear said without preamble as he dismounted. He was 65 years old, with white hair and a face like cracked leather, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "I was in town yesterday. There is a man there, fat fellow from back east, asking about a young woman. Red hair, green eyes. Says she is his runaway fiancée." Silas felt his stomach tighten. "She is here." "I figured." Old Bear glanced at the cabin. "He has men with him, 4 that I counted. Hard-looking types. They are offering money for information, and Cooper took some." "Sheriff Cooper. He is in their pocket now. Word is they are going to get some kind of warrant. Make it legal to take her." Old Bear spat into the dirt. "Legal? As if paper makes wrong right." Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her face pale. She had heard everything. "I should go," she said. "I should leave now before they come here." "You are not going anywhere." Silas moved to stand beside Old Bear. "How much time do we have?" "Hard to say. They were still asking around when I left. But they will find their way here eventually. Someone will talk." Silas nodded grimly. "Then we prepare." Old Bear looked at him, then at Eleanor, then back at Silas. A knowing smile crossed his weathered face. "Been a long time since I have seen that look in your eyes, Silas. Almost forgot you were still capable of caring about something. Shut up and help me reinforce the doors." They worked through the day, Silas and Old Bear and Eleanor together, turning the cabin into a fortress. They reinforced the doors, created firing positions at the windows, set up a system of warning signals. Old Bear showed Eleanor how to load the rifles while Silas explained the defensive layout. "If they come," Silas said, "I want you in the back room. If anyone gets past me, you shoot them." "I understand." "I mean it, Eleanor. Do not hesitate. Do not try to be merciful. If they get through that door, you kill them, or they will kill you." She met his eyes steadily. "I understand." That night, after Old Bear had ridden back to his own cabin with promises to return at the first sign of trouble, Silas and Eleanor sat by the fire. The weight of what was coming hung heavy in the air between them. "Why are you doing this?" Eleanor asked. "You could have turned me away. You could have avoided all of this trouble." Silas stared into the flames. "I told you. I am tired of standing by while evil wins." "That is not the whole truth." He looked at her. She was watching him with those intelligent green eyes, seeing through all his defenses. "No," he admitted. "It is not." "Then tell me." He took a deep breath. "When I saw your photograph that first day, something happened to me. I do not know how to explain it. I felt like I had been waiting for you, like some part of me recognized you even though we had never met." He laughed bitterly. "I know how that sounds. A foolish old man with romantic delusions. You are not old. I am 52 years old, Eleanor. More than twice your age." And I am 24 and feel like I have lived 100 years. She moved closer to him. Age is just numbers, Silas. What matters is what is in here. She touched her chest. And what is in here? She touched her temple. You have more life in you than any man I have ever known. You do not know what you are saying. I know exactly what I am saying. She was very close now, close enough that he could smell the soap she had used that morning, see the freckles scattered across her nose. I came here expecting to marry a stranger for survival. I never expected to feel anything. But these past 4 days with you, I have felt more alive than I have in years. Silas closed his eyes. Eleanor, I am not asking for anything. I am not making any promises. I am just telling you the truth. She placed her hand on his cheek. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that meeting you was not a misfortune. It was a gift. He opened his eyes. She was inches away, her face soft in the firelight. Every instinct told him to pull back to maintain the distance that had protected him for so long. He did not pull back. Instead, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead. A gentle touch, a promise, a beginning. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow may be difficult. She nodded and rose. At the door to her room she paused. Silas. Yes. I am glad you found me. Then she was gone, and Silas was alone with the fire and the sound of the wind in the pines and a feeling in his chest he had thought he would never feel again. They came the next evening. Silas was on the porch when Hunter's low growl alerted him the same urgent warning that had led him to Eleanor 10 days ago. Then he heard the hoofbeats, not one horse but several. He patted the dog's head and spoke quietly. Good boy, now stay. He grabbed his rifle and stepped inside. Eleanor, they are here. She was already moving, taking up her position by the back window with the pistol in her hands. Her face was pale but determined. Through the window, Silas watched a group of riders emerge from the trees. He counted 5 men, 4 rough-looking types with guns on their hips, and leading them mounted on a fine black horse that looked absurdly out of place in this wilderness was a fat man in a city suit. Marcus Webb. He was exactly as Silas had imagined. Bulging eyes and a bloated face, thin lips twisted in a permanent sneer, soft hands that had never done a day of honest work. He looked at Silas's cabin like a man inspecting property he intended to purchase. Mr. Hawthorne, Webb called out. His voice was high and nasal, unpleasant even from 50 feet away. I know you can hear me. I am here for what belongs to me. Silas stepped onto the porch rifle, held casually but ready. There is nothing here that belongs to you, Webb. Oh, but there is. A young woman. Red hair. Green eyes. My fiancée who ran away due to a misunderstanding. Webb smiled, showing small yellow teeth. I just want to talk to her. Make sure she is all right. Take her home where she belongs. She does not want to go with you. With respect, Mr. Hawthorne, that is not your decision to make, or hers. Webb reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. I have a warrant, signed by Sheriff Cooper. Eleanor Whitmore is wanted for theft. $200 stolen from my personal safe. I am simply here to escort her back to face justice. Justice. Silas almost laughed. Is that what you call it? Sending men to drag a woman through the woods, tying her up, beating her? Webb's expression flickered. I do not know what she told you, but I assure you, any treatment she received was necessary to subdue a dangerous criminal. My men were simply doing their duty. Your men were animals, and if they had succeeded in doing what they intended, I would have hunted each of them down and killed them slowly. The 4 gunmen shifted uneasily. They had not expected this level of resistance from one old mountain man. Mr. Hawthorne, Webb's voice hardened. I am trying to be reasonable, but I should warn you that interfering with a lawful warrant is a serious crime. I have friends in high places, judges, marshals. If you do not surrender that girl, you will find yourself in more trouble than you can imagine. Silas raised his rifle and pointed it directly at Webb's chest. Let me tell you something, Webb. You may have friends in the cities. You may have money and lawyers and politicians in your pocket, But out here, none of that matters. Out here, the only law is the one enforced by the man with the faster gun and the steadier hand. He cocked the rifle. I have killed more men than you have had hot dinners. I have tracked outlaws through deserts and mountains and swamps. I have been shot 6 times and stabbed 3 times, and I am still standing. So I want you to think very carefully about your next words. Because if you give me a reason, I will put a bullet through your heart and sleep like a baby tonight. Silence. The gunmen looked at each other, then at Webb. They had signed up for easy money, not a gunfight with a man who looked like he had been carved from mountain granite. Webb's face had gone red, then pale. He was not accustomed to being defied, to being threatened. His kind usually operated behind lawyers and hired muscle never facing consequences directly. "This is not over," he said finally. "I will be back with federal marshals, with an army if necessary. That girl is mine, and I will have her." "You can try." Silas did not lower the rifle. "But understand this, the next time you set foot on my land, I will not waste time talking. I will start shooting. And I will not stop until you and every man with you is dead." Webb jerked his reins and turned his horse. "You are making a terrible mistake, Hawthorne. Terrible. The only mistake I made was not shooting you the moment you opened your mouth." Webb and his men rode away into the gathering darkness. But Silas knew with the certainty of a man who had spent a lifetime dealing with violent men that this was only the beginning. This was the moment that had begun this story. Silas stood in the doorway, blood dripping from his fingertips onto the worn wooden planks rifle raised against the retreating shadows. And Eleanor stood beside him, no longer the broken woman he had found on that mountain road. He walked back inside to find Eleanor standing in the middle of the room, the pistol still in her trembling hands. "You heard?" She nodded. "He will come back." "Yes." "With more men, with the law on his side." "Yes." She set the pistol down and looked at him with eyes that held fear and determination in equal measure. "Then we have to be ready." Silas crossed to her and for the first time pulled her into an embrace. She stiffened initially, then melted against him, her head resting on his chest. "I will not let him take you," he said into her hair. "I swear it on my life." "I know." Her voice was muffled against his shirt. "I believe you." They stood like that for a long time, 2 damaged people clinging to each other in a cabin surrounded by wilderness and enemies. Outside, the wind picked up, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled at the rising moon. The war had begun. The morning after Webb's visit brought a cold rain that turned the trails to mud and shrouded the mountains in gray mist. Silas stood at the window watching water run in rivulets down the glass, thinking about what was coming. Eleanor sat at the table behind him, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Neither of them had slept well. The threat of Webb hung over the cabin like the storm clouds that obscured the peaks. "He will not wait long," Silas said without turning around. "Men like him cannot stand being defied. It eats at them like poison." "I know." Eleanor's voice was tired but steady. "What do we do?" "First, we need to know what he is planning. I need to go to town." She set down her cup sharply. "No. That is exactly what he wants. He will have men watching. The moment you show your face—" "I have survived worse than Marcus Webb's hired guns." He turned to face her. "But you are right that I cannot walk into town openly. I will go around approach from the north. There are people there who will talk to me. And if something happens to you—" "What then?" Her voice cracked slightly. "I cannot defend this place alone, Silas. I am not a soldier." He crossed to her and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Her fingers were cold despite the warmth of the fire. "Nothing will happen to me. I have been doing this for a very long time." He squeezed her hands. "Old Bear will stay with you while I am gone. If anything goes wrong, he will get you out." "I do not want to run any more." "I know, and I am not asking you to run. I am asking you to survive. There is a difference." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Be careful." "Always." He left an hour later after Old Bear arrived with news that made the trip even more urgent. The fat man sent a telegram yesterday. Old Bear reported as he warmed himself by the fire. I have a friend at the telegraph office. She showed me the message. What did it say? It was addressed to someone named Judge Cornelius Vance in Philadelphia. Asked for a federal warrant. Said Eleanor was a thief who had fled across state lines. Silas felt his jaw tighten. Federal warrant. That changed everything. A local sheriff's warrant could be ignored or challenged. But a federal warrant would bring marshals real law enforcement with real authority. How long do we have? Hard to say. Telegraph takes a day to reach Philadelphia. Judge would need time to sign the warrant and send it back. Then they would need to dispatch a marshal. Old Bear did some mental calculation. 3 days, maybe 4, maybe less if Vance is eager to help his friend. 3 days, maybe less. Silas looked at Eleanor, who had gone pale at the news. I need to find out more about this Judge Vance, he said, and I need to know who else in town might be willing to help us. Stay here with Old Bear. I will be back before nightfall. He did not give her time to argue. He grabbed his coat, his rifle, and his pistol and headed for the door. Silas? He stopped with his hand on the latch. Come back to me. It was not a request. It was a command spoken with all the authority of a woman who had finally found something worth fighting for. I will. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Silas reached the outskirts of Silver Creek. He left Shadow tied in a grove of pines a mile from town and approached on foot using the trees and the morning mist as cover. Silver Creek was not much of a town, a single main street lined with wooden buildings, most of them showing their age. A general store, a saloon, a boarding house, a small church, and the sheriff's office. Perhaps 200 souls called this place home, most of them miners, ranchers, or those who made their living serving miners and ranchers. Silas made his way to the back door of the boarding house where Martha Jenkins was hanging laundry despite the threatening weather. She was a stout woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and a face that had seen enough hardship to recognize it in others. Mr. Hawthorne, she said without surprise as he emerged from the shadows, I wondered when you would come. You know why I am here. The girl. Martha continued hanging shirts, her movements unhurried. That Webb fellow has been asking about her all over town, offering money for information. She snorted, as if any decent person would help a man like that. Some people did help him. Daniel Cooper is not decent people. He stopped being decent the day he pinned on that badge and realized he could sell it to the highest bidder. She finished with the laundry and turned to face him. What do you want to know? Everything. Who is Webb? Who is this Judge Vance he is talking to, and who in this town might be willing to stand against them? Martha glanced around to make sure they were not observed, then gestured for him to follow her inside. In her small kitchen over cups of strong tea, she told him what she had learned. Marcus Webb was a debt collector from Philadelphia, though that title barely scratched the surface of what he was. He bought debts from banks and businesses, then collected them using whatever means necessary. He had connections with corrupt judges, police, and politicians who looked the other way when his methods crossed the line from aggressive to criminal. He has destroyed families, Martha said, driven men to suicide over debts they could never pay, and the women— She shook her head. There are rumors. Women who owed him money and suddenly disappeared. Women who became his property in everything but name. And Eleanor. Her father owed him $5,000. When the father died, Webb came to collect. From what I hear, he became obsessed with her. Not just about the money, about her. Martha's expression darkened. He wants to own her, Mr. Hawthorne, body and soul. And he will not stop until he does. Silas felt a cold fury building in his chest. What about Judge Vance? Cornelius Vance is a federal judge in Pennsylvania. He and Webb have been friends for 30 years. They went to school together, did business together. Vance has signed warrants for Webb before warrants that allowed him to seize property and people with the full force of federal law behind him. Martha leaned forward. If Vance signs this warrant, it will not just be Webb's hired guns coming for your girl. It will be United States Marshals, and even you cannot fight the federal government." Silas absorbed this information in silence. The situation was worse than he had thought. Webb was not just a wealthy bully. He was part of a system, a network of corruption that stretched from Colorado all the way back to the halls of power in the East. "Is there anyone in town who might help?" "Deputy Holden," Martha said immediately. "James Holden. He is young, only 30, but he is honest. He took the job because he believed in the law, not because he wanted to sell it. He has been uncomfortable with Cooper's behavior ever since Webb arrived. Will he act against his own sheriff? I do not know, but I know he is troubled. A man who is troubled can sometimes be turned." She reached across the table and gripped his arm. "There are others, too. Good people who do not like what Webb represents. But they are scared, Mr. Hawthorne. Scared of his money, his power, his connections. They need someone to show them it is possible to fight back. Then I will show them." He left Martha's boarding house through the back door and made his way to the sheriff's office. It was a risk showing himself in daylight, but he needed to speak with Deputy Holden, and he needed to do it now. The office was a small wooden building with bars on the windows and a single cell in the back for holding prisoners. When Silas pushed through the door, he found James Holden alone at the desk, cleaning a rifle. Holden looked up sharply, hand moving toward his sidearm. Then he recognized Silas and relaxed slightly, though wariness remained in his eyes. "Mr. Hawthorne, I was wondering when you would show up." "Then you know why I am here." "The Whitmore woman." Holden set down the rifle and stood. "Webb has been raising hell about her. Says you threatened him and his men at gunpoint." "I told him to get off my land. That is not a threat. That is a right. He has a warrant. He has a piece of paper signed by a corrupt sheriff who took his money. That is not the same thing." Holden was quiet for a moment. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the muddy street. "I know what Cooper did. I know he took Webb's money. I know that warrant is not worth the paper it is printed on." He turned back to Silas. "But I am just a deputy. I cannot override my own sheriff. I cannot—" "You cannot, or you will not." Holden's jaw tightened. "It is not that simple." "It is exactly that simple." Silas stepped closer. "There is a young woman on my mountain who has been beaten, terrorized, and hunted like an animal. A man is trying to drag her back to Philadelphia to make her his slave in everything but name, and the only thing standing between her and that fate is me." He met Holden's eyes. "And maybe you. What do you want from me?" "Information, time, and when the moment comes, the courage to do what is right instead of what is easy." Holden stared at him for a long moment. Something was happening behind those young eyes, some internal battle between duty and conscience. "Webb sent another telegram this morning," he said finally. "I saw Cooper file it. It went to Judge Vance in Philadelphia." "I know about Vance." "Then you know what is coming. Federal marshals, maybe soldiers. Webb is not playing games anymore." "Neither am I." Holden reached into his desk and pulled out a folded paper. "This came in yesterday, a copy of the message Webb received from Vance." He handed it to Silas. "The warrant has already been signed. A federal marshal left Philadelphia 2 days ago. He will be here within the week." Silas read the telegram, his blood running cold with each word. "Warrant approved. Stop. Marshal Thomas Reed dispatched. Stop. Arrive Silver Creek within 7 days. Stop. Full authority to apprehend and extradite. Stop. Trust you will handle situation with usual discretion. Stop. Vance within 7 days. Maybe sooner." "Why are you showing me this?" Silas asked. Holden took off his deputy's badge and set it on the desk. "Because I did not become a lawman to help rich men from the East kidnap women. Because I have seen how Webb's men look at Miss Whitmore's photograph, and it makes me sick." He looked at Silas with something like determination in his eyes. "Because my father taught me that the law is supposed to protect the innocent, not serve as a weapon for the powerful." "What are you saying?" I am saying that when those marshals come, I will not be able to help you openly. But I can give you warning. I can tell you when they are coming, what routes they are taking." He picked up the badge and pinned it back on. "And if things go wrong, if it comes to a fight, I know which side I will be on." It was more than Silas had hoped for. Not an ally exactly, but not an enemy either. In the days ahead, that might make all the difference. "There is something else," Holden said as Silas turned to leave, "something that worries me more than the marshals." "What?" "Webb hired more men yesterday. Not the kind you bring along for legal proceedings, hard cases, gunfighters." Holden's expression was grim. "I think he is planning something before the marshals arrive, something that will not require warrants or courts." Silas nodded slowly. That made sense. Webb was not a patient man, and he was not accustomed to waiting for the slow machinery of law to deliver what he wanted. If he could take Eleanor by force before the marshals arrived, he could present it as a done deal, just another criminal apprehended and returned to face justice. "When?" "I do not know. Soon. Tonight. Tomorrow. I will send word when I know more." "Thank you, Deputy." "Do not thank me yet. This could end badly for all of us." Silas left the sheriff's office through the back door and made his way around the edge of town. He was nearly to the tree line when he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. Marcus Webb was standing outside the saloon deep in conversation with a group of men. Not his original 4 gunmen. These were different. Harder. More dangerous. Silas counted 6 of them, all armed, all with the look of men who had killed before and would not hesitate to do so again. But it was not the gunman that caught Silas's attention. It was the man standing slightly apart from the others, dressed in the black clothes of a preacher with a silver cross around his neck. Something about the preacher did not fit. His eyes were too watchful, his stance too alert. He looked like a man playing a role rather than living it. As Silas watched, Webb laughed at something one of the gunmen said, then turned and spoke directly to the preacher. The preacher nodded, a cold smile crossing his face. Silas filed the image away in his mind and slipped into the forest. He did not know who the false preacher was, but his instincts told him the man was dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than the gunman. He pushed Shadow hard on the ride back to the cabin, arriving just as the sun was beginning to set. Old Bear met him at the door with a rifle in his hands and questions in his eyes. "What did you learn?" Silas told him everything. The warrant, the marshals, the new gunman, the fake preacher. Old Bear listened in silence, his weathered face growing more troubled with each revelation. When Silas finished, the old man shook his head slowly. "This is worse than I thought. Webb is not just trying to get the girl back. He is trying to destroy anyone who helped her." "I know. If federal marshals come, you cannot fight them. That would make you an outlaw, a traitor." "I know that too. So what are you going to do?" Silas looked at the cabin where Eleanor was visible through the window, pacing anxiously as she waited for news. She had asked him to come back to her, and he had. But what good was coming back if he could not protect her? "I am going to find a way," he said. "There has to be something we can do, some way to prove that Webb's warrant is based on lies, some way to expose him for what he really is. And if there is not—" Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said in a voice as hard as the mountains around them, "Then I will kill Marcus Webb and every man who stands with him, and I will deal with the consequences after." Old Bear studied him with those ancient eyes that had seen so much. Then he nodded slowly. "I was hoping you would say that." Inside the cabin, Eleanor rushed to Silas the moment he came through the door. She stopped just short of touching him, uncertainty flickering across her face. "What happened? What did you find out?" He told her. All of it. He did not spare her the details or soften the truth. She deserved to know exactly what they were facing. When he finished, she was pale but composed. She walked to the window and stood there for a long time looking out at the darkening forest. 7 days, she said finally. That is how long we have. Maybe less. Webb is planning something. He hired more gunmen, and there is a man with them dressed as a preacher who I do not trust. Eleanor turned back to face him. Then we need to use the time we have. We need to prepare." "Eleanor, no." Her voice was firm now, stronger than he had ever heard it. "I am done being the helpless victim waiting to be rescued or captured. You have taught me to shoot. You have taught me to survive. Now teach me to fight." "This is not your battle." "Of course it is my battle. It has always been my battle. Marcus Webb is not chasing you, Silas. He is chasing me. And I refuse to sit here like a rabbit in a trap while you and Old Bear risk your lives on my behalf." She crossed to him and took his hands the same way he had taken hers that morning. "We fight together," she said. "All of us, or we do not fight at all." Silas looked at her, this woman who had stumbled into his life broken and afraid, and saw someone else entirely. Someone fierce, someone brave, someone who had found her courage in the darkest of circumstances. "Together," he agreed. That night over a dinner none of them had much appetite for, they made their plans. Old Bear would ride out at first light to contact people he knew in the surrounding mountains. Hunters, trappers, men who owed him favors or simply hated corrupt authorities. It was not much of an army, but it was something. Silas would continue to fortify the cabin and prepare for the assault he knew was coming. He would also try to learn more about the false preacher and whatever Webb was planning. Eleanor would practice shooting, learn the terrain around the cabin, and prepare herself mentally for what might come. She had never killed a man before. If this went badly, she might have to. "One more thing," Old Bear said as they were finishing. "You mentioned this Judge Vance, the one who signed the warrant. What about him?" "I know someone in Denver, a newspaper man. He has been investigating corruption in the federal judiciary for years. If Vance is as dirty as you say, there might be records, evidence, something we could use to challenge the warrant." A spark of hope flickered in Silas's chest. "Can you reach him?" "I can try. It would mean riding to Denver and back, 3 days at least." "We may not have 3 days." "I know. But it might be our only chance to fight this legally, to prove that Webb's warrant is based on fraud." Silas considered it. 3 days was a long time. A lot could happen in 3 days. But Old Bear was right. If they could prove that Vance was corrupt, that he had signed the warrant as a favor to his friend rather than based on genuine evidence of a crime, they might be able to have it thrown out. "Go," he said, "but be careful. Webb may have people watching the roads. I have been avoiding people on roads since before you were born, boy." Old Bear stood and stretched his ancient bones. "I will leave at dawn. Try not to get killed before I get back." "I will do my best." After Old Bear retired to the small lean-to he used when staying at the cabin, Silas and Eleanor sat alone by the fire. The weight of everything that was coming pressed down on them like a physical force. "Silas," Eleanor said quietly, "if this does not work, if Webb takes me, he will not. But if he does—" She turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes, though her voice remained steady. "I need you to know that these days with you have been the happiest of my life. I need you to know that whatever happens, I do not regret any of it." "Eleanor, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I came to Colorado expecting to sell myself to a stranger in exchange for safety. I never expected to find anything real. But what I have found with you, this connection, this feeling, it is more real than anything I have ever experienced." "I feel it too. I know." She smiled through her tears. "I see it in the way you look at me, the way you touch me, the way you put yourself between me and danger without a second thought." She reached out and cupped his face in her hands. "I love you, Silas Hawthorne. I know it is too soon. I know it does not make sense. But I love you." He had not heard those words in 15 years, not since Mary had said them the morning he left for the war, standing on the porch of their little house in Pennsylvania with Sarah on her hip and tears streaming down her face. He had thought he would never hear them again, had thought that part of his life was over forever. "I love you too," he said, and the words felt like a door opening, like light flooding into a room that had been dark for too long. "God help me, I love you too." She kissed him then. Not on the forehead as he had kissed her. On the mouth. A real kiss, deep and hungry, and full of all the fear and hope and desperate longing that had been building between them since the moment they met. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "Whatever happens," Eleanor whispered, "we face it together. Together." They sat by the fire until the flames died to embers, holding hands, not speaking, drawing strength from each other's presence. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf called to its pack. War was coming. But for this one night, they had peace. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and tension. Old Bear left at dawn the first morning, riding hard for Denver with the desperate hope of finding evidence against Judge Vance. Silas watched him go and prayed silently that the old man would return in time. Meanwhile, Silas and Eleanor worked to turn the cabin into a fortress. They reinforced the doors with additional bars. They created firing positions at each window. They stockpiled ammunition and water and food. They planned escape routes through the forest in case the cabin fell. Eleanor threw herself into the preparations with a determination that impressed Silas. She practiced shooting until her arms ached, firing round after round at targets until she could hit a can at 30 feet with reasonable consistency. She learned the terrain around the cabin, memorizing trails and hiding spots and the locations of the traps Silas had set. She was not the same woman he had found on that mountain road. That woman had been broken, defeated, running on nothing but survival instinct. This woman was a warrior in the making. On the second evening, Deputy Holden arrived with news. "Webb is moving tomorrow night," he said, standing on the porch with rainwater dripping from his hat. "I overheard him talking with his men at the saloon. He is done waiting for the marshals." Silas felt his stomach clench. "How many men?" "8, including the preacher. And that preacher is not what he seems. I did some checking. His name is Jack Mercer. He is a confidence man and a killer from Kansas. He has been arrested twice for murder, but walked both times because witnesses disappeared. Why would Webb need a con man?" Holden hesitated. "I think Mercer is supposed to get close to you, to gain your trust, to find a way into the cabin that does not require a frontal assault." A cold understanding settled over Silas. The preacher was not there to fight. He was there to deceive, to find Eleanor's location and report back, to open a door in the middle of the night. "Thank you, Deputy. You have taken a great risk coming here." "I could not live with myself if I did not." Holden looked past Silas to where Eleanor stood in the doorway. "Ma'am, I hope you know that not everyone in this territory is like Webb. Some of us still believe in doing what is right." "I know," Eleanor said, "and I am grateful." Holden nodded and turned to go. Then he stopped and looked back at Silas. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I will do what I can. But you should know that Cooper has deputized Webb's men. They will be coming with legal authority, or at least the appearance of it. Legal authority means nothing when the law itself is corrupt. I know, but the men with the guns do not always see it that way." Holden mounted his horse. "Good luck, Mr. Hawthorne. I have a feeling you are going to need it." After Holden left, Silas and Eleanor sat at the table and studied the crude map he had drawn of the approaches to the cabin. "They will come from the main trail," Silas said, tracing the route with his finger. "It is the only way to approach with horses. If we can slow them down here." He pointed to a narrow spot where the trail passed between 2 large boulders. "We can funnel them into our kill zone." "You talk about killing so easily." "I have had a lot of practice." He looked up at her. "Does that bother you?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father used to tell me that violence was never the answer, that civilized people solved their problems with words and laws and reason." She laughed bitterly. He was a fool. Words and laws and reason only work when everyone agrees to play by the same rules. Men like Webb do not play by any rules except their own. "So violence does not bother you. Violence in defense of the innocent does not bother me." She met his eyes steadily. "If I have to kill to protect myself, to protect you, to protect this life we are building together, I will do it. And I will not apologize." Silas felt a surge of admiration for this woman who had grown so much in such a short time. "Then let us make sure you do not have to." They spent the rest of the evening going over the plan, where Eleanor would position herself, what signals they would use, what to do if the cabin was breached, what to do if Silas fell. "If I go down," he said, "do not try to save me. Get to the back trail and run. Old Bear showed you the route to his cabin. You can hide there until this is over." "I am not leaving you." "Eleanor." "No." Her voice was fierce. "I told you. Together. That means we live together or we die together. There is no middle ground." He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that her life was worth more than his, that she had years ahead of her while he had already lived most of his. But he saw the determination in her eyes and knew that arguing would be pointless. "Together," he agreed, "but promise me you will not take unnecessary risks. Promise me you will stay behind cover and only shoot when you have a clear target." "I promise." She smiled slightly. "I may be brave, but I am not stupid." That night they did not sleep in separate rooms. Eleanor came to Silas's bed and curled against him, her head on his chest, her arm draped across his stomach. He held her close and listened to her breathing slow as exhaustion finally claimed her. Tomorrow men would come to kill them. Tomorrow blood would be spilled and lives would be lost. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, for a few precious hours, they had each other. And that was enough. The attack came at dusk the following day. Silas was on the porch scanning the tree line when he heard the sound of approaching horses. Not trying to be stealthy this time, coming straight up the main trail with the confidence of men who believed they had already won. "Eleanor." She was beside him in seconds, pistol in hand, face pale but determined. "They are here." "How many?" He counted the shapes emerging from the forest gloom. 8. No, wait. 9. His jaw tightened. "Webb is with them." Marcus Webb rode at the center of the group, protected by gunmen on all sides. He was wearing a city suit that looked absurd in the wilderness, and his fat face was twisted into a triumphant smile. "Hawthorne," he called out, "this is your last chance. Send out the girl and I might let you live." Silas raised his rifle. "I gave you my answer 2 days ago, Webb. It has not changed." "I was hoping you would say that." Webb made a gesture, and his men spread out taking cover behind trees and boulders. "I am going to enjoy watching you die." The first shot came without warning. One of Webb's gunmen, too eager to wait for orders, fired at the cabin. The bullet thudded into the wooden wall 6 inches from Silas's head. He did not flinch. He simply raised his rifle, took aim, and fired. The gunman who had shot first fell from behind his cover, a red hole in his chest. "Inside!" Silas shouted at Eleanor, then dove through the door as a hail of gunfire erupted from the tree line. Bullets tore through the windows, sending glass spraying across the floor. Eleanor was already at her position by the back window, scanning for anyone trying to flank them. "How many did you see around back?" 2, maybe 3. Silas took up his position at the front window and began returning fire. The cabin's thick walls stopped most of the bullets, but he knew that would not last forever. Webb's men had numbers and ammunition on their side. All they had to do was keep firing until Silas ran out of bullets or made a mistake. He had to thin their numbers, fast. He waited until one of the gunmen broke cover to advance, then fired. The man spun and dropped. Another tried to circle around the left side of the cabin. Silas tracked him, led him slightly, and squeezed the trigger. The man went down, clutching his leg. From the back of the cabin, he heard Eleanor's pistol bark twice. "Did you hit him?" "I hit something." "That would have to be good enough." Silas turned his attention back to the front, where the remaining gunmen were now much more cautious. They stayed behind cover, firing blind, not wanting to suffer the same fate as their comrades. But Webb was shouting something, gesturing angrily. He wanted this finished. Then Silas saw the preacher. Jack Mercer was moving through the shadows to the right of the cabin, staying low, using the terrain expertly. He was not heading for the front door. He was heading for the root cellar entrance at the side of the cabin. The entrance Silas had forgotten to secure. Eleanor. The cellar. But before he could move, the front door exploded inward. Two of Webb's men had rushed the porch while he was distracted. They came through the shattered door with guns blazing. Silas shot the first one in the chest at point-blank range. The second tackled him before he could fire again, and they went down together in a tangle of limbs and fury. The man was strong, younger than Silas, and fighting with the desperation of someone who knew that losing meant dying. He got his hands around Silas's throat and squeezed. Stars exploded in Silas's vision. He could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the pressure crushing his windpipe. Then the pressure was gone. Eleanor stood over them, the butt of her pistol bloody. The attacker lay unconscious beside Silas, a dent in his skull where she had struck him. "Are you all right?" Silas gasped for air, his throat on fire. "The cellar." But it was too late. The trapdoor in the corner of the cabin burst open, and Jack Mercer climbed through, a knife in his hand and murder in his eyes. "Well now," Mercer said with a cold smile, "that was easier than I expected." He lunged at Eleanor. Silas tried to rise, but his limbs would not cooperate. The strangling had taken too much out of him. He could only watch in horror as Mercer's knife arced toward the woman he loved. Eleanor did not scream, did not freeze, did not hesitate. She raised her pistol and fired. The bullet caught Mercer in the shoulder, spinning him around. He stumbled, crashed into the table, and went down. His knife clattered across the floor. Eleanor stood over him, pistol aimed at his head, her hand steady as stone. "I missed his heart," she said quietly. "I will not miss again." Mercer looked up at her, blood seeping between the fingers he pressed to his wound. For the first time there was fear in his eyes. "You would not shoot an unarmed man. You tried to kill me. You are not a man. You are an animal." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "And I have no problem putting down animals." "Eleanor." Silas had managed to get to his feet. He stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding his rifle. "Do not kill him. We need him alive." "Why?" "Because he can testify about Webb, about the kidnapping, the assault, the murder attempt. He can tell the marshals what really happened here." Eleanor's jaw tightened. For a long moment Silas thought she would shoot anyway. Then she lowered the pistol. "Tie him up. If he tries anything, I will finish what I started." Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Silas moved cautiously to the window and saw Webb's remaining men retreating into the forest. 3 bodies lay in the clearing. 3 more had fled. Webb himself was nowhere to be seen. "Is it over?" Eleanor asked. "For tonight." Silas slumped against the wall, exhaustion washing over him. "But Webb got away. He will be back. With the marshals this time." Eleanor looked at Mercer, who was groaning in pain on the floor, then at the destruction around them, then at Silas. "Then we had better be ready." They had survived, but the war was far from over. The night after the attack was the longest of Eleanor's life. They had bound Jack Mercer's wounds and tied him to a chair in the corner of the cabin. He drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally muttering curses or threats, but he was no longer a danger. The bullet had torn through muscle but missed bone and artery. He would live, assuming infection did not set in. Silas had taken a beating. His throat was purple with bruises where the gunman had strangled him, and he moved stiffly, favoring his left side where he had landed hard on the floor. But his eyes were still sharp, still watchful, still scanning the darkness beyond the shattered windows for any sign of renewed attack. Eleanor sat beside him on the porch, the pistol that had saved both their lives resting in her lap. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but something inside her had changed. She had shot a man tonight, had watched him fall, had stood over him ready to put a second bullet in his brain. She did not feel guilty. That was what surprised her most. She felt nothing but a cold satisfaction that she had defended herself and the man she loved. "You did well tonight," Silas said quietly. "I almost killed him." "You should have. He would have killed you without a second thought." "I know." She looked at the pistol in her lap. "Is this what it feels like, killing someone?" "The first time is always the hardest. You expect to feel something. Guilt, horror, shame." He shook his head slowly. But when someone is trying to kill you or someone you love, you do not feel any of those things. You just do what needs to be done. And afterward you live with it. Some men drink to forget. Some men go mad. Some men make peace with it and move on. He looked at her. I have killed more people than I can count, Eleanor. Most of them deserved it. Some of them did not. I carry all of them with me every day, but I do not let them stop me from doing what is right. They sat in silence for a while, watching the first light of dawn creep over the eastern peaks. What happens now? Eleanor finally asked. Webb will regroup. He lost 3 men tonight, 4 if you count Mercer. His remaining gunmen will be scared, angry, looking for revenge. Silas's jaw tightened. And the federal marshals are still coming, maybe 4 or 5 days now. Can we hold out that long? We have to. The morning brought unexpected visitors. Eleanor was inside checking on Mercer and trying to make breakfast from their dwindling supplies when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She grabbed the pistol and ran to the window, heart pounding. But Silas was standing on the porch with his rifle lowered, and there was something like relief on his face. It is all right, he called to her. It is Deputy Holden, and he is not alone. Eleanor stepped onto the porch and saw 4 riders coming up the trail. James Holden was in the lead, his deputy's badge glinting in the morning sun. Behind him rode Martha Jenkins on a sturdy mule, her face set with determination. And behind her came 2 men Eleanor did not recognize, both armed, both with the weathered look of frontier settlers. Mr. Hawthorne, Holden said as he dismounted. We heard the gunfire last night, saw the muzzle flashes from town. He looked at the bullet holes scarring the cabin walls. Looks like you had quite a party. Webb came calling. He will not be so eager next time. Martha pushed past the men and took Eleanor's hands in hers. Are you all right, child? When I heard the shooting, I feared the worst. I am fine, better than fine. Eleanor managed a small smile. I shot one of them. Good for you. Martha's expression was fierce with approval. These are the Carter brothers, Samuel and William. Their ranch borders the high country to the north. They have no love for men like Webb. Samuel Carter was a big man with a thick beard and hands like shovels. His brother William was leaner, quieter, but there was something dangerous in his eyes that suggested he knew his way around violence. We heard what that eastern bastard has been doing, Samuel said. Buying off the sheriff, terrorizing a young woman. That is not how things are done out here. He spat into the dirt. We figured you might need some extra guns. Silas looked at the small group assembled before him. A deputy who had chosen conscience over duty. An older woman with more courage than sense. 2 ranchers with rifles and grudges. It was not much of an army, but it was something. Come inside, he said. We have a lot to discuss. In the cabin over coffee and what remained of their bacon, they assessed the situation. Mercer, now fully conscious and glaring at them with undisguised hatred, refused to say anything beyond curses and threats. But they did not need his cooperation. His presence alone was evidence of Webb's criminal conspiracy. The problem, Holden explained, is that Webb still has legal cover. That warrant from Judge Vance is technically valid even if it was obtained through corruption. When Marshal Reed arrives, he will be obligated to enforce it. Unless we can prove the warrant is fraudulent, Silas said. That is where Old Bear comes in. If he can find evidence of Vance's corruption, we might be able to get the warrant thrown out before Reed even gets here. And if he cannot... Holden was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Then we have a choice to make. We can hand Eleanor over and hope she gets a fair trial in Philadelphia, or we can fight federal marshals and become outlaws ourselves. The cabin fell silent. Everyone knew what that choice would mean. Fighting the United States government was not something any of them took lightly. There is a third option, Eleanor said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. I could turn myself in, go with Webb willingly, end this before anyone else gets hurt. No. Silas's voice was hard as iron. That is not an option. Silas, listen to me. 3 men died last night. More will die if this continues. And for what? For me. She shook her head. I am not worth people dying over. You are worth everything. He crossed to her and took her hands. I did not survive 15 years of solitude just to find you and lose you. I did not fight off Webb's men last night just to hand you over like some kind of prize. His eyes blazed with intensity. You are staying here, with me, and anyone who wants to take you will have to go through me first. Eleanor looked at him, tears forming in her eyes. You cannot fight the whole world, Silas. I do not have to fight the whole world. Just Marcus Webb and anyone stupid enough to stand with him. Martha stepped forward and put a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. Child, I have lived in this territory for 20 years. I have seen men like Webb come and go. They think their money and their power make them invincible. But out here, far from their lawyers and their corrupt judges, they are just men, and men can be beaten. She is right, Samuel Carter added. Webb is a bully. Bullies fold when someone stands up to them. Eleanor looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people, most of whom she had known for only a few days, were willing to risk everything for her. Their freedom, their lives, their futures. Why? She asked. Why would you do this for a stranger? It was Holden who answered. Because if we do not stand up to men like Webb who will, because if we let him win here, he will do this again to someone else. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are against you. Eleanor wiped her eyes and straightened her spine. All right, we fight. But we do it together, and we do it smart. No unnecessary risks, no heroic last stands. We survive this, all of us, or we do not fight at all. Silas smiled the first real smile she had seen from him since the attack. That is my girl. They spent the rest of the day planning and preparing. The Carter brothers would patrol the approaches to the cabin, watching for any sign of Webb's men. Holden would return to town and try to delay any legal action against Silas and Eleanor while they waited for Old Bear. Martha would stay at the cabin to help Eleanor and to tend to their prisoner if necessary. There is something else, Holden said as he prepared to leave. Webb received another telegram this morning. I did not see the contents, but Cooper was smiling when he read it. That cannot be good. Keep your eyes open, Silas said. If you learn anything else, send word immediately. I will. Holden mounted his horse and looked down at them. I never thought I would be conspiring against my own sheriff, but some lines should not be crossed no matter what badge you wear. He rode away, and Silas watched him go with a mixture of gratitude and concern. Holden was a good man, but he was also young and inexperienced. If Webb discovered he was helping them, the deputy would be in as much danger as the rest of them. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Eleanor found Silas standing alone at the edge of the clearing. He was staring at the forest, his face unreadable. What are you thinking about? Mary and Sarah. His voice was soft. My wife and daughter. I have not thought about them this much in years. What were they like? Mary was gentle, kind. She saw the good in everyone even when they did not deserve it. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Sarah was the opposite, wild, fearless. She would chase chickens around the yard and climb trees twice her height. She was going to be a force of nature, that girl. You must miss them terribly. I did. For a long time I thought the missing would kill me. But then I came up here to these mountains and I learned to lock it all away, to not feel anything. He turned to look at her. And then you came along and unlocked everything I had buried. Is that a bad thing? I thought it would be. I thought feeling again would destroy me. He reached out and touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. But it has not. If anything, it has made me feel more alive than I have in 15 years. Silas, I know the timing is wrong. I know we are in the middle of a war, but I need to say this in case I do not get another chance. He took a deep breath. When this is over, when Webb is gone, and the marshals have left and we are finally safe, I want to marry you. I want to spend whatever years I have left with you by my side. I want to build a life together here in these mountains far from the world that has hurt us both so badly. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. Are you asking me? I am asking you. Eleanor Whitmore, will you marry me? She did not hesitate. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, and for a moment the war and Webb and all their troubles faded away. There was only the two of them holding each other as the stars came out one by one overhead. But the moment could not last. The sound of gunfire shattered the silence coming from somewhere to the south. Silas released Eleanor and grabbed his rifle. Inside. Now. What is it? I do not know, but that came from the direction of the Carter brothers' patrol. They ran back to the cabin where Martha was already at the window with a shotgun in her hands. Mercer was laughing in his chair, a horrible, knowing laugh. Sounds like the cavalry has arrived, he said. I told you Webb would not give up. I told you he would come back, and this time he brought enough men to finish the job. Shut up. Silas crossed to the window and peered into the darkness. He could see nothing, but he could hear more gunfire now, closer moving in their direction. Martha, Eleanor, take positions. Whatever is coming, we face it together. They waited in tense silence as the gunfire grew closer. Then suddenly it stopped. A voice rang out from the darkness, a voice Silas recognized. Hawthorne, I know you are in there. I have something that belongs to you. Marcus Webb. Come out and see. I promise not to shoot. Yet. Silas moved to the door, but Eleanor grabbed his arm. Do not go out there. It could be a trap. It probably is a trap, but I need to know what he has done. He stepped onto the porch, rifle raised, and looked out at the clearing. What he saw made his blood run cold. Webb stood at the edge of the tree line, flanked by at least a dozen men, more than before. He had recruited reinforcements from somewhere, and kneeling in front of him, hands bound, face bloodied, was one of the Carter brothers, William, from the look of it. I found your spy, Webb called out with a triumphant smile. He put up quite a fight, killed 2 of my new recruits before we brought him down. His brother was not so lucky. Samuel Carter, dead, because he had chosen to help them. Silas felt a rage building inside him, hot and terrible, the same rage that had driven him through the war and the years of hunting men afterward. He wanted to charge down there, rifle blazing, and kill Webb where he stood, but that would be suicide. 12 men against 1. Even he could not beat those odds. What do you want, Webb? What I have always wanted, the girl. Webb gestured, and one of his men pressed a pistol to William Carter's temple. Send her out, and I will let this man live. Keep her, and you can watch me execute him right here. Eleanor appeared in the doorway beside Silas. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. Let him go. I will come with you. Eleanor, no. Look at them, Silas. Look at how many there are. We cannot win this fight. She turned to face him, and he saw the fear in her eyes, but also the determination. One man has already died for me. I will not let another. If you go with him, he will destroy you. Maybe, but at least I will have tried to do the right thing. She stood on her toes and kissed him hard and desperate. I love you, Silas Hawthorne. Remember that whatever happens. Before he could stop her, she walked down the porch steps and into the clearing. Webb's smile widened as she approached. That is a good girl. I knew you would see reason eventually. Let him go first. You promised. I promised no such thing. Webb grabbed Eleanor's arm and pulled her toward him. I said I would let him live if you came out. I did not say when. He nodded to his man, who pressed the pistol harder against Carter's head. But since you asked so nicely, I suppose I can be merciful. He gestured, and the gunman stepped back. William Carter slumped forward, still alive, still breathing. You see, Webb said, I can be reasonable when I want to be. He looked at Silas, who was still standing on the porch, rifle aimed at Webb's heart. And now, Mr. Hawthorne, I suggest you put down that weapon. My men have orders to kill everyone in that cabin if I do not return in 10 minutes. That includes your lady friend here and the old woman inside. Silas's finger tightened on the trigger. He could kill Webb right now. One shot. End this monster forever. But Eleanor was standing right beside Webb, and there were 12 guns pointed at her. Slowly, painfully, Silas lowered his rifle. Very good, Webb said. Now we are going to take a little trip. Miss Whitmore and I have unfinished business in Philadelphia, but do not worry. I will send you a wedding invitation. He dragged Eleanor toward the horses, and Silas could only watch as the woman he loved was taken from him. The last thing he saw before they disappeared into the darkness was Eleanor's face, pale and terrified, but still defiant. This was not over. The hours after Webb took Eleanor were the darkest Silas had ever experienced. He sat on the porch, staring at nothing as Martha tended to William Carter's wounds, and Mercer laughed from his chair inside. The night was silent except for the wind in the pines and the muffled sounds of the injured man's pain. He had failed. After everything, after all his promises and preparations, he had failed to protect her. She was gone, taken by the monster she had fled across a continent to escape, and it was his fault. "Stop." Martha stood in the doorway, her face stern. "Stop what?" "Stop wallowing. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. That girl needs you, and you are sitting here like a man already defeated." "I am defeated. Webb has a dozen men. He has the law on his side. He has Eleanor." Silas shook his head. "What am I supposed to do?" "You are supposed to fight." Martha crossed her arms. "The Silas Hawthorne I have heard about does not give up. The Reaper does not let a fat bully from Philadelphia take what belongs to him." "That man does not exist anymore." "Then bring him back." She walked to him and slapped him hard across the face. "Bring him back, Silas, because that girl loves you and she is counting on you to save her. Are you going to let her down?" The slap stung, but not as much as her words. Eleanor was counting on him. She had surrendered herself to protect him and the others, trusting that he would find a way to save her. How could he give up when she had shown such courage? He stood slowly, his muscles protesting, his body aching. But beneath the pain something else was stirring. The cold, calculating part of him that had hunted men for years, the part he had tried to bury but never quite killed. Where would Webb take her? "The Silver Ridge Mine," William Carter said weakly from inside. He was sitting up now, his face bandaged, his eyes burning with the same rage Silas felt. "I heard them talking. They have been using the old mine as a base. It is defensible, isolated, and most people have forgotten it exists." "How many entrances?" "2. Main shaft and a ventilation tunnel on the north side. The tunnel is narrow, barely wide enough for one man, but it opens into the main chamber." Silas nodded, his mind already working through the tactical possibilities. "Webb will expect me to come through the front. He will have guards, traps, maybe even explosives. So you go through the back." "Alone." "Not alone." Deputy Holden appeared in the clearing, rifle and hand badge conspicuously absent from his chest. "I just came from town. I know where they took her, and I know that Webb sent most of his men back to prepare for the marshal's arrival." "How many at the mine?" 5 or 6, maybe fewer." Holden's expression was grim. "Webb sent most of his dozen men back to town to prepare for the marshal's arrival. He thinks he has already won, so he only kept a skeleton crew at the mine. That is our advantage." Martha stepped forward. "So am I." "Martha, no. This is going to be dangerous. I know how to shoot. I know these mountains, and that girl is the closest thing I have had to a daughter in 20 years. Her eyes were fierce. "Try to stop me." William Carter pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly. Martha had cleaned and bandaged his wounds, and though he was pale from blood loss, the fire in his eyes burned brighter than his pain. "Count me in too. Webb killed my brother. I owe him a debt that can only be paid in blood." Silas looked at the small group assembled before him. A wounded rancher, an older woman, a young deputy who had thrown away his career. None of them were soldiers. None of them had any business going up against armed gunmen. But they were all he had, and they were enough. "All right," he said. "Here is what we are going to do." The Silver Ridge Mine lay 5 miles west of the cabin, nestled in a narrow canyon that offered only 2 approaches. The main entrance was a large opening in the rock face framed by rotting timbers from the mine's operational days. The ventilation shaft was higher up, almost invisible behind a screen of brush and fallen rocks. Silas led them through the darkness, moving silently along trails he had walked 100 times during his years in these mountains. Holden followed close behind, then Martha, then William Carter, who moved slowly but determinedly despite his injuries. They reached the ridge above the mine just as the first light of dawn was touching the eastern sky. Below them, Silas could see the main entrance lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on the canyon walls. 2 guards stood outside, rifles in hand, looking bored and tired. "I count 2 at the entrance," Holden whispered. "Probably more inside." "At least 3, Silas agreed, "plus Webb and Eleanor. How do we get past the guards?" "We do not. You and Martha go to the ventilation shaft. It should bring you out in the main chamber behind wherever Webb is holding her." He handed Holden a coil of rope. "Lower yourselves down quietly. When you hear gunfire at the entrance, that is your signal to move." "What about you?" "I am going through the front door." "That is suicide." "Maybe." Silas checked his rifle, then his pistol, then the knife at his belt. "But I am going to make a lot of noise doing it, enough to draw everyone's attention to the entrance while you get Eleanor out. And if you get killed, then you get her to safety and make sure Webb never hurts anyone again." He met Holden's eyes. "Promise me, Deputy, no matter what happens to me, you get her out." Holden hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." "Good." Silas turned to William Carter. "You are with me. Can you shoot?" "I can shoot." Carter's voice was rough with pain and grief, but his hands were steady on his rifle. "And I owe Webb for my brother." "Then let us go pay that debt." They split up. Holden and Martha made their way along the ridge toward the ventilation shaft, while Silas and Carter descended toward the main entrance. The 2 guards never saw them coming. Silas took the first one with his knife, moving out of the shadows like a ghost and opening the man's throat before he could make a sound. Carter shot the second one as he turned toward the noise, the rifle crack echoing off the canyon walls. So much for stealth, but stealth had never been the plan. "Webb," Silas shouted into the mine entrance, "I am coming for you!" He charged into the darkness, Carter at his heels, as answering gunfire erupted from deeper inside. The mine was a maze of tunnels and chambers, lit sporadically by torches and lanterns. Silas moved through it like he had been born in the darkness, using the muzzle flashes of his enemies to locate and eliminate them one by one. One gunman stepped out of a side tunnel and Silas shot him in the chest. Another tried to ambush them from behind, and Carter put him down with a bullet to the head. They pushed deeper into the mine, following the sound of Webb's voice, which was screaming orders to his remaining men. Then they reached the main chamber. It was a large space, probably the central hub of the mine's operations in its working days. Support beams lined the walls and abandoned equipment lay scattered across the floor. At the far end, Marcus Webb stood behind a makeshift barricade of crates and barrels, a pistol in one hand and Eleanor's arm in the other. 3 gunmen were positioned around the chamber rifles trained on the entrance where Silas now stood. "That is far enough, Hawthorne." Webb's voice was high and panicked, nothing like the smooth confidence he had displayed before. "One more step, and I kill her." Silas stopped, his rifle still raised. His eyes moved across the chamber, taking in the positions of the gunmen, the layout of the space, the distance between himself and Webb. He was outgunned, outmanned. If he made a move, Webb would shoot Eleanor before he could get close. But he was not alone. A sound from above, the scrape of rope against rock, and then from the darkness near the ceiling, Deputy Holden and Martha Jenkins descended into the chamber behind Webb's barricade. The gunmen did not see them. They were too focused on Silas. Holden raised his rifle and shot one of the gunmen in the back. Martha's shotgun roared, taking down another. The third gunman spun toward the new threat, and Silas fired, dropping him where he stood. Suddenly it was just Webb alone, his pistol still pressed against Eleanor's head. "Stay back!" he screamed. "I will kill her! I swear I will kill her!" "You do that," Silas said calmly, walking forward, "and nothing in this world will stop me from tearing you apart with my bare hands. You think I am afraid of you. I am Marcus Webb. I have ruined men 10 times your size. I have destroyed families, empires, careers. You are nothing but a broken-down old mountain man." "Maybe." Silas was close now, close enough to see the sweat beading on Webb's forehead, the tremor in his gun hand. but I am also the man who is going to watch you die." He took another step. Webb's finger tightened on the trigger, and Eleanor moved. She had been waiting, Silas realized later. Waiting for the right moment when Webb's attention was fully on Silas and his grip on her arm had loosened. She drove her elbow back into his stomach, the same move she had used on Mercer, and twisted away from him. The pistol went off, but the bullet went wide, sparking off the rock wall. Silas closed the distance in 2 strides. He grabbed Webb by the throat and slammed him against the barricade hard enough to make the crates shudder. "Please," Webb gasped. "Please, I have money. I can give you anything you want. Land, gold, power. Just let me go." "I do not want your money." Silas squeezed harder. "I do not want your land or your gold or your power. I want you to know what it feels like to be helpless, to have your life in someone else's hands, to beg for mercy and know it is not coming. I am sorry. I am sorry for everything. Please, just sorry." Silas laughed a cold, terrible sound. "You are not sorry for what you did. You are sorry you got caught." He leaned close, his face inches from Webb's. "You were going to rape her, beat her, break her down until there was nothing left but an empty shell that would do whatever you wanted. I have seen your kind before. I have killed your kind before. And I am going to kill you now." "Silas," Eleanor's voice soft but firm. He looked at her. She was standing a few feet away, bruised and battered but alive. Her eyes met his. "Do not kill him. He deserves to die. I know, but if you kill him like this in cold blood, you will become what he accused you of being, a murderer, a monster." She stepped closer. "Let the law deal with him. Let him stand trial for what he has done. Let the world see what kind of man he really is. The law is corrupt. Vance will set him free. Maybe, or maybe not." She reached out and touched his arm. "Old Bear is in Denver. Remember looking for evidence against Vance. If he finds it, Webb's protection disappears. He will face real justice." Silas stared at her, then at Webb, whose face was turning purple from the pressure on his throat. He wanted to kill this man, wanted it more than he had ever wanted anything in his life. But Eleanor was right. If he killed Webb now, he would be no better than the monsters he had spent his life fighting. Slowly, painfully, he released his grip. Webb collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, clutching his bruised throat. "You are under arrest," Holden said, stepping forward with rope in his hands. "For kidnapping, assault, attempted murder, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." As Holden bound Webb's hands, Silas pulled Eleanor into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, and he could feel her trembling. "It is over," he whispered into her hair. "It is finally over." "Not yet," she said, "but almost." They emerged from the mine into the light of dawn, blinking against the sudden brightness. Webb was bound and gagged, guarded by Holden and Martha. William Carter limped behind, exhausted but alive. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made them all raise their weapons. But the rider who emerged from the tree line was familiar Dusty from hard riding, his ancient face creased with exhaustion but triumphant. Old Bear. He had ridden through the night, pushing his horse to its limits, praying he would not be too late. The sight of Eleanor standing free of Webb in chains made him slump with relief. "You are late," Silas said. The old man smiled. "I got here as fast as I could. Had to make a few stops along the way." He held up a leather satchel, including the office of a certain newspaper editor in Denver who was very interested in what I had to tell him about Judge Cornelius Vance. "You found evidence?" "I found everything. Bank records showing payments from Webb to Vance, letters detailing their conspiracy, testimony from victims who were too scared to come forward before." Old Bear's smile widened. "Judge Cornelius Vance is finished, and so is anyone who ever took money from him." Silas felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tight since the moment Eleanor first told him about Webb. "What happens now?" "Now we wait for Marshal Reed. When he arrives, he will find that the warrant he was sent to enforce was issued by a corrupt judge who is himself under investigation. Old Bear looked at Webb, who was glaring at them with impotent fury. And instead of arresting Miss Whitmore, he will be taking Mr. Webb back to face federal charges. Justice. Real justice. After everything, it was finally within reach. Holden looked at the badge he had thrown away, then at the group around him. "I suppose I will need a new job now." "Silver Creek needs an honest sheriff," Martha said with a knowing smile. "Once Cooper is removed for taking Webb's money, they will be looking." Old Bear clapped the young man on the shoulder. "You did the right thing, Deputy. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. But you can live with yourself afterward." Eleanor stepped forward and took Silas's hand. "Can we go home now?" "Yes," he said. "Let us go home."